Call Jonathan Young.
Thank you, sir. I'm very pleased to stand and speak to the Parole Amendment Bill here in its third reading. Mr. Speaker, this is good legislation. The bill proposes a number of amendments to the Parole Act 2002. The explanatory notes state that they are to reduce the number of unnecessary parole hearings, but not to increase the length of time an offender spends in prison, and also to improve efficiency by simplifying pre-hearing processes and clarifying when an offender's attendance at a parole hearing is required. The proposed changes do not affect the earliest date at which an offender would become eligible for parole, nor the actual length of an offender's sentence. But it does create incentives for prisoners to engage in rehabilitation activities and thereby become less likely to reoffend when they are released. It also reduces the trauma for victims who are faced with unnecessary annual parole hearings when the prisoner has not made efforts in rehabilitation and the outcome is known. But the parole hearing continues because of the mandatory annual review. So the ability to extend the period between parole hearings up to a maximum of 2 years instead of every year, as is currently the case, does not mean that the prisoners will experience a longer sentence. The United Nations Human Rights Committee has held to the fact that to ensure that an offender's continued detention beyond their parole eligibility date does not become arbitrary, there must be regular periodic reviews of the individual offender's case by an independent body to determine if continued imprisonment is substantively justified. The Human Rights Committee has held that 12-month intervals between parole reviews with judicial review rights meant that continued imprisonment was not inherently arbitrary. The European Court of Human Rights has held that a 2-year interval between parole reviews did not render detention arbitrary, because the decision to fix that interval was approached with flexibility and due regard to the individual's circumstances. The bill provides that if the parole board declines to release an offender on parole, it must ordinarily specify a date within the following 2 years for the offender's next parole review, instead of every year as is currently the case. As part of that decision, there is also a provision for the board to identify relevant circumstances, formerly called milestones, relating to the risk the offender poses to community safety for the offender to achieve before the next hearing. And this, sir, is an element of consideration and flexibility. If the offender achieves these early, the case can be brought forward. Mr. Speaker, the bill also extends the maximum postponement period for offenders serving indeterminate sentences and determinate sentences of 10 or more years from 3 to 5 years. We do expect the 5-year term to be reserved for the most extreme cases, as the current 3-year term is used only a handful of times every year. So, Mr. Speaker, each year there are about 5,000 parole hearings. On average, offenders have 3 hearings before being granted parole. So in putting victims at the heart of the justice system, we are delivering on our promises. Our plans to reduce unnecessary parole hearings for offenders will reduce stress for victims of crime. Victims of crime should not have to face the very stressful prospect of parole hearings year after year when an offender is clearly not safe to release into the community and has made little or no effort at rehabilitation. So these measures which this bill proposes will also save the taxpayer approximately $700,000 a year. Our changes will provide strong incentives for prisoners to address their offending behaviour. Corrections is strengthening its rehabilitation focus with the introduction of case management systems for all prisoners, and can also refer prisoners for an early parole hearing if they have made significant progress, such as reaching rehabilitation milestones or successfully completing programs. All prisoners have education screening with individual learning plans designed for them. Obviously, they've been speaking to our Minister of Education. So the number of prisoners gaining qualifications has increased by 830%, up from 197 in 2008 and 9 when we came into office, to 1,833 in 2012 and 13, a significant increase. Almost 3,000 prisoners have started literacy and numeracy programs in the 2013-14 financial year, up 155% compared to 2007 and 8. An almost 1,500% increase has happened in places on drug and alcohol treatment programs for prisoners since 2008. So, sir, there is ample opportunity and also evidence that prisoners in corrections are being encouraged and are undertaking increased rehabilitation programs. So, sir, this bill does not affect the earliest date at which an offender would become eligible for parole, nor the actual length of an offender's sentence, but proposes greater efficiency in the parole process, protects victims from unnecessary trauma, and provides a greater incentive for prisoners to engage meaningfully in a personalised rehabilitation program. And so this helps to achieve our better public services targets, and results so far are impressive, and we continue to build on them. Our target was to reduce prisoner reoffending by 25% by 2017. We have seen a 12.2% reduction in offending so far. Our target is to reduce overall crime rates by 15%, violent crime by 20%, and youth crime by 25% by 2017. And the result so far is that total crime rate is down by 16%, violent crime down by 11%, and youth crime down by 30%, exceeding its first target of 5% and second target of 25%. So, sir, we are giving prisoners far more opportunities to rehabilitate. And of course, in that regard, we are making our communities and our streets and our homes safer places for New Zealanders. Sir, this government has done a tremendous amount for what could be deemed as the lowest socio-economic group in our society. 28,000 children in New Zealand have a parent in prison. And so our work, sir, to build rehabilitation, and in this bill to ensure that people engage in rehabilitation, is doing so much for the safety of our society and doing so much for children whose parent, sometimes even both parents, are prisoners. So New Zealanders deserve to feel safe in their homes and communities. National is focused on preventing crime and reducing the impact of crime by improving the responsiveness of the justice system for victims. So I'm very happy to stand in support of this excellent bill. Thank you.